And we are recording. Hello, Frank.
Hey.
I'm glad to have you here on Traction Stories. So it's the name of my podcast where I talk about traction. I interview B2B tech entrepreneurs and we discuss how they manage to find some traction for their products, usually SaaS companies. And in your case, it's really interesting because I think a big part of the traction comes from finding a way to differentiate and to become the best solution for a specific usage. And you find really interesting ways to differentiate in a competitive market, like a really competitive one. So I think it's going to be a great episode. So thanks for coming, Frank.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. You need to be, if it's like a big market, what's called red ocean market, and you need to have a red ocean strategy. That means how can you be just different? You don't necessarily have to be better. Well, you're better for somebody, right? But you just need to be different. So it's very important, from a sort of very clever buyers, when you go and reach out to buyers, they're going to ask you, how are you different to the rest of the guys, right? And if that difference is important to them, they are very inclined to talk to you. So yeah.
I'm so happy you said this because my company's name is Purple Ocean because I try to help people differentiate. And that's exactly it. Thanks, Frank. But maybe we should start with what's your company? What's Salesforge?
So I've been in sales for well over a decade. Started my career at Google, and Google became a big corp, and then I pretty much downsized in terms of employee count all the way to one, being a founder of this company. In my last job, I had a sales team of 50 people, so I was VP sales. I was scaling a company from C to Series A. It was back in the days growth at all costs, which is why I had such a big team, a lot of headcount, more bodies or more people meant more pipeline, more revenue back in those days. And then I started to build SalesForge 2.5 years ago, where the main premise of SalesForge and other forges, so we have multiple products, is to help companies to generate that sales pipeline. Typically, the KPI is meetings. I need to book meetings with people, and that's what they're optimizing towards. But they want to book those meetings, but with the least headcount possible. And it is possible to do that as of pretty much 2-3 years ago, when LEMS came out, a lot of automations came out, and A10 came out. Essentially, we're naturally in a new phase of the economy where suddenly you can generate superior output levels on per human basis without necessarily having the requirement to hire more humans. So just to give you an idea, back in the days, my sales team was 50 people. Now today it's 5 people, and the 5 people that I have on my team produce more output than the 50 people back then, just to give you an idea. So that means we do a lot on the, let's call it, automation front. We use our own tech, but we also use other technologies to increase output levels. And so the flagship product, essentially, which is SalesForge, what it does is it allows you to do outreach really well, and allows you to do it at scale. Really well means you can connect all your accounts of your sales team, so meaning email accounts in particular, connect their LinkedIn profiles, and then reach out to your market a bit more programmatically. So this sort of approach is really well suited for companies that have a very big total addressable market. So for example, over 3,000 companies typically, I say, is the threshold. At that point, you want to be reaching out to your market using what's called a wide net strategy. A wide net strategy means you're reaching out wide net to a lot of people, and by doing so, you're sort of advertising essentially a bit more. So don't think of necessarily the outreach of being like, an email and we want to get to a conversion. So a lot of people today, when they do the outreach, they think of it as like advertising. What's the difference between advertising through Google Ads, right? Spending a lot of money there, or advertising cheaply via email and LinkedIn? The way that you position your copy, the way that you do things, etc., is also a bit different today and can be done differently. So then within the software itself, apart from onboarding your sales team, you can also spin up an AI agent. So today we run one of the best AI SDRs on the planet called Agent Frank, named after me being in sales for over a decade. We thought, what should be the name of the agent? And I thought to myself, well, it could be just called after me. May as well, I'm the CEO of the company that I've spent in sales for 10 years. So we may as well give it like, a name after somebody in the company rather than these weird names from movies by other competitors where it just doesn't necessarily relate to a real person. So that's pretty much the story why the agent is called Agent Frank, but ultimately it fully autonomously builds that pipeline instead of humans. So autonomously means it finds the leads against your ideal customer profile criteria. It crafts a unique email in any language, English, French, whatever you want really. So there's about over 20 languages where LLMs work really well. Crafts those emails, crafts additional emails, so crafts up to 3 emails. Unique emails means it looks at what do you sell as a business, what's your service, what's your product, and looks at the context of that you have to outline in the software. And then we match this context, what we call the seller data, with buyer data. What do we know about each recipient when we reach out to them? So we do web crawling at scale, essentially. We go and check out the website. We go and check out the LinkedIn profile of the person and other data points, maybe whether Frank has been on the podcast, and stuff like that. And we may leverage that in the context. So that's why doing podcasts is very important, right? So it goes into LLMs and crawling, etc. So, but ultimately, like these two contexts, seller context and buyer context, gets stitched together, and then the computation happens on top of that, and then we instruct to compute in French, German, etc. Deliver that. So we specialize heavily in email deliverability as a concept. We operate the most advanced infrastructure in the market, which runs on 3 domain registrars, 4 different email server types. So it's a very sort of advanced system. And then so we send it out. If the people typically don't respond, then the agent will go and use your profile, Gasper. You become essentially the sidekick of the agent, and essentially leveraging the profile of a single founder or multiple people in the team, it then also reaches out programmatically. That means it computes a message on LinkedIn, delivers. But if and then what happens naturally is when the replies come back to you, right, as a human or in your email box, all of that gets aggregated, and then the agent can respond back literally within a couple of minutes. And that is like super important because timing kills the time. If you spend too long not answering, it's gonna kill that opportunity, essentially the ability to book a demo. Typically there's like a 2 hour window where you need to really respond to every reply, and then the probability of a meeting happening drops massively. So you can look up online. There's a lot of information about that, but the agent responds in 2 minutes, because imagine, Gasper, you reply to me back, you're still at your laptop probably, right? So that's why it's important just to be very fast in terms of replies, and this is how you can increase the conversion rate of actually booking more meetings with your prospects. So yeah, that's what the agent does. And the default process is not, so there's a bunch of these companies out there on Reddit, etc. They also talk about it's all about replacing humans, etc. And it's like a just marketing stunt that they do. But we, our hard line is really, you can't replace humans, first of all, for different reasons, also regulatory reasons. In some places, AI agents are illegal to be used. For example, cold calling. You can't use agentic systems to programmatically cold call people at scale, right? My phone would be always buzzing then, right? So kind of think of it this way. So it's not legal. It's only legal on the inbound front, where we also use actually AI agents to do voice calls on the inbound motion. So agents are good for something, and then humans are good for something else, right? That's how you have to think about it. And by blending the best of both, this is how you achieve superior levels. You still accommodate the humans. You put humans on more cold calls. You put agents more on maybe the copy front of writing an email, LinkedIn, etc. That's what you can do. But sometimes the strategy is also like, let's use the humans for key accounts, key opportunities, and let's use the agents for what's called the long tail, right? The small fish, that we're going after, right? So that's how you can also think about it. So while humans do what's called spearhead approach, the targeting, maybe doing whatever manually stuff, and then there's the wide end approach, right? Reach out to a lot of people and have sort of this advertising mindset. And that's where the agents are more fit. And then we have the other forges. Not going to talk about them, but essentially they support the.
I want to dive more into this part.
That's kind of intro on that, but it gives you a good idea of sort of, I guess, the unique positioning that we were talking about in the market. So yeah.
Yeah, you gave me the full overview of of the features of the vision. So if I have to summarize it in a way that's comprehensive and like maybe vulgarized, but simplified, it's an outreach tool with advanced capabilities with agents, automations that allow you to have a better outreach, more precise, and to also have automations like handling multiple accounts, inbound calls, and other different aspects of the sales process that you can automate with AI, whereas you keep some part for the humans.
Yeah, the only one thing just to correct, it's only designed for outbound. The inbound part, we use other agents, which is not our own agents.
Okay.
So essentially, if your own technology doesn't do the things you want it to do, you use some other technology as well on top of that, right? So that's how we think about it, right? It could be another AI, company that uses their own technology, and if there's other places where you want to use AI, of course you use other tools additionally. So these are the smartest companies that I know how they operate.
And in terms of business-wise, you started this 2.5 years ago. I understand you were one of the quickest companies to go to a few million ARR. Can you tell us more about how you grew and the key stages you went through and what stage you are right now?
Sure. So we're the fastest growing company in our segment, 3 million in less than 12 months. Depends how you count. Yeah, it's like either 11 months or either 10 months, but like super fast. We don't know any other competitor in our category that grew faster than us. We don't shout about it like too much out there. And then, yeah, recently we became the top 10 AI agent company in Europe by Sifted as well. So among companies like Lovable and N8N, etc. So yeah, doing fairly well. We don't share our current revenue numbers.
Yeah.
It's actually on purpose to keep that mystique in place. Typically, it only makes sense to give everybody an idea how fast you grew in the first year, and then it becomes less important after that. And only bootstrap companies typically share their data then later on. But we're not bootstrap, we're VC back. So we decided to raise a round. And the reason why we've done that is because we're first-time founders. So I found two co-founders on Y Combinator matchmaking platform. There's two of them. They're on the tech front, and I'm on the sales front. We scaled actually to the first million without employees at all. So we're always lean and mean ourselves. And I would say the reason why we raised the $500,000 round is because it was our first business. The other co-founders would really appreciate the cash the from the fundraise, especially one of them borrowed from his gamma like 10K as well. So he was like getting into debt, just to make sure this actually happens. And that same co-founder also decided to do a mortgage just before starting this company. I mean, he did it like a crazy thing. But anyway, and then the other problem that we had, it's what we call category 1 problem, is that we had cash flow issues. So a lot of money was coming in, but also a lot of money was going out. And we were literally getting down to very close to zero, essentially. Right, to a point where like, damn, there's like massive. It just goes up to like 100K in balance in Revolut, all the way down to zero very fast, and it's like a lot of fluctuation. And we thought, well, let's get a loan, from a bank or something, just to get sort out the cash flow problem. And guess what the banks say? If you're less than a year old, they don't give you a loan because you're super high risk. So who else could you give you, a loan of like 100K or 200K, whatever, And there weren't really options out there to do that. I even reached out to Nathan Latka from FounderPath, and guess what Nathan says? Exactly the same answer. We don't give out, loans for less than 12 months. So that means we were forced to raise to sort out the cash flow issue as the number one problem in the business. And that's how we became VC backed. And I think there's nothing wrong with sort of, raising money if you're kind of go smart about it, because VC money means, do you have the ability and probability of getting to 100 million ARR? VCs are looking for the 100x. They're looking for the unicorn, right? And in our case, there is a path to 100 million plus ARR being valued at over $1 billion. There is. So that's why we thought, okay, let's go down the VC path. And that's how we went down the VC path. And the fun fact, though, what happened in the end, we actually didn't use the money because we were growing so fast. So yes, even though we did have cash flow issues, even though we did go down to zero, somehow it sorted itself out. And we never used the money, and it just sits still in the bank account, gathering dust for the last 2 years.
A funny story. You could almost repay the VC and just try to get your
I
share
would
back.
wish to. Guess what? It says in the clause that you can't do that. So yeah, we were definitely discussing that. Maybe we just give the money back with interest and everything. But no, it's very true. Like once they're in, they're in. These guys, they never want to get out, right? It's this is like the kind of, I don't know, you call it OpenAI moment. If you invest into a startup that actually is growing and it has a huge potential, you never exit. You're there till the end, essentially. You want to be riding the wave, It's like Revolut with other companies that massively scaled up. Yeah, you want to be in for the long run because essentially the more time passes, the exponential returns kind of compound there. So yeah. Anyway, it's our first business. We thought, whatever, let them be in. Let's not, because you don't look just at investors from a cash standpoint, like injection of cash. You need to get the right people on board. So we did a lot of due diligence. We spoke to over 100 VCs, just to give you an idea. To raise a round, you need to speak to 100 VCs. A lot of people say, "Oh, Frank, I can't raise any money." I'm like, "How many people do you speak to?" I spoke to 10 VCs. Dude, please. Come on, you don't know how the funnel works. The funnel works in the following way: that like in sales, so to get one answer, you need to contact 100, and that's how fundraising works.
Yeah, this is
Raise a round, you need to contact 100. So that's typically how it works. There's also, of course, there's stories where you spoke just to one VC and 10, whatever, but that's like a rare case. This is what goes into podcasts, etc. But look at typical cases. It's 100. So people don't understand how maths works generally, and yeah, I think this is also where there's a huge disconnect with the founders how you have to look at traction, what you have to do. Somebody says, Frank, I'm trying to talk to my potential customers, validate my idea, etc. How many customers you're talking to? 2 a week? I was like, that's nothing. That's literally nothing. You're doing what we call rookie numbers. Well, you should be talking like 10, 20 customers every week, trying to validate your idea and scaling, etc. So,
Mhm.
um,
The volume comes from the confirmation of how the market fits
yeah,
comes
people just don't do
from
enough
volume.
scale. Like they don't understand how much actually hard work goes into becoming a founder and actually making it happen, etc. And the requirement to work 7 days a
Yeah.
week and working 18 hours a day,
Mm,
and that is very normal. And you do that for a year or two, and people just don't understand that's what it takes for you to make it. So there's a
mm,
huge mindset issues, and people don't understand how to do sales and marketing for the products. And yeah, that's what I
yeah.
see from a typical founder standpoint, and which is why it's quite normal to see a very high failure rate in startups because people just don't know what they're doing. So
Yeah. Well, now that we have your backstory and the thing, how you go to the stage, I want to know more about the product's strategy
mm,
because you launched this in a very competitive market,
yes,
yet you managed to grow really fast and do something that I usually don't recommend when I talk to clients is to do the platform bet. You
mm,
said instead of saying we have one SaaS that does one thing really well, I'm gonna do multiple things at once. And most companies say, oh, we have a platform that can do X, this, and Y, and a lot of different things, and they struggle because adoption is a big commitment. You ask people to commit for many things at once. It's like a changing everything they've been doing, the process and the operation to have a new tool that does everything.
mm.
You chose to do the platform bet, but in a way that separates every product. So you have Salesforge, but how many products do you actually have if you count them?
7 right now.
7 products. That's what I want to dive more into because the way to differentiate is to create an ecosystem in your hand. So when people enjoy one of the products, that's one of your entry points.
Yep.
Salesforge being the number one and the top one as we discussed. You found a way to make it easy for them to change and upgrade, upsell to
Hmm.
different tools,
Yep.
products. And I think it's really interesting that you decided to separate all of these products to make it easier for them to buy. So can you dive more into
Hmm.
quickly, like just one word, but where what all of these products are, like what
Sure,
each
sure.
all 7 of them, and how did you we ordered.
Sure. So, the way you build products, you need to have some sort of framework in mind. So, a quick framework is that in cold email or generally in sales, there's a specific sort of what I call pillars of success. What drives success actually in sales? So, on one hand, there's what's called the infrastructure pillar, where you need to set up to date domains and email accounts to improve
Mhm.
deliverability. So, we have 3 products just on that. 3 out of 7 products specialize in setting up domains and email accounts for email deliverability purposes. Then there is a pillar called the data pillar, finding the right leads. Very difficult, but it's a very big business as well in itself. So that's the data pillar or targeting pillar. The next pillar is the copy pillar. Copy pillar, writing good emails in a localized language, French, German, whatever, you name it, and writing really good ones. That pillar, we have a product called SalesForge. So SalesForge does the computations and does other things as well on the copy front. And the final pillar was what's called the orchestration or execution pillar. How do you actually send emails or LinkedIn messages in a way that drives performance? Also, SalesForge in there. We also have a product called WarmForge. It actually improves performance and deliverability of the infrastructure, but also improves performance of the sending part. So need to have some sort of framework that you're kind of abiding by, what drives success for a typical user, and then against that, you're building products. Or you're building features in a single product, which is like an app. So we have competitors just build one brand, one app, one website, and then build a bunch of features. And so what we decided is, when we talk about product strategies, like if everybody's building literally like nearly everybody's building one brand, one website, and just build a lot more. That already tells you what is the alternative path. You have to just ask. You can just ask from ChatGPT, what's the alternative to building the super app? The alternative is to build what's called the modular build. The where there's multiple components. And so there are companies out there that we can all kind of relate to. Apple. So you're gonna buy the iPhone, the Mac, etc. And that's the ecosystem. And if you ask very smart people, for example, like Jason Lemkin, he's like the SaaS godfather. He talks about a lot about VCs and scaling companies and raising money. He says unless there is a multi-product play, he calls it multi-product. I call it the compound play on the product, where it's clear compound. That is one of the key components of what will make you big. If that is not in place, as early as you can. He typically says it should be like year 2 or year 3 or something. We've just been doing that in year 1, you know. Year 1, we already had multiple products. But I'm gonna also, apart from having this as part of our core strategy, the other problem that we had to solve in the early days, because it wasn't easy to scale the 3 million in the first year, is that what happened was we launched Salesforge as a product, and Salesforge in itself did not take off as we expected. So imagine you build a software back then, ChatGPT was launched, and the product was just crafting good emails that would be sent out. But to give you an idea, so one of the things that we were telling the customer, please set up their domains and email accounts so you can hook it up to the software and we can send those emails. But the customers didn't do that. They were either lazy, incompetent, whatever the problem was. And so what I was forced to set up these domains and email accounts for them. And I was charging them. And I was going to GoDaddy, setting up domains and spending manually time to set it all up. And this was a huge blocker to the whole pipeline that we had. We knew we're not going to hyperscale. Like, we're not going to have that hockey stick. So this is where we're like, guys, we need to park the development of Salesforge and we need to solve this second problem, which is the other pillar, the infrastructure pillar. So we built the second product, pretty much 3 months. Mailforge.ai. Mailforge.ai is an infrastructure product, still exists today, still is one of the biggest products that we have from a revenue standpoint, where you set up domains and email accounts in like a few minutes. You connect that to Salesforge and off you go. So it eliminates the time. So what we optimize is we massively have reduced time to like 5 minutes. We have reduced massively the cost. A typical Google account costs anywhere between €8 to €12, and ours cost like $3 to $2. Like, it's massive savings that we were able to complete there. And then the other one was like, it's kind of the friction. Like, you don't have to do it. It's like imagine you could get it done in 5 minutes and you don't have to kind of think about it. Whereas setting up domains is a tedious and painful process, super painful.
It is.
So that's how we got to the compound model. We kind of had to build it to compound, because product 1 would not go for hypergrowth unless product 2 would exist. And guess what happened? Once product 2 got launched, then both products started to scale massively. So that's what we call PMF. The PMF came from compound. So this model, you can read about it online, called software compound model. There's a good article by Rippling. So there's other spaces that do that. Rippling is in HR and finance space. It's a US company. So they had something similar. They actually offer multiple sort of products and services to their customers, and that's how they massively grow. They compound from a product, because each product essentially makes money for them, right? So it's similar for us, but we just started it like super early.
When the thing I found really interesting in this is that I understand the product logic in terms of how to help the customers do more and all the parts enablement, upsells, and all the business aspect. The thing I'm really intrigued about is how you decided to make multiple websites. Does it mean that you have multiple funnels? Or do you pitch every product independently, or do you pitch them all at once? How do you organize all when you sell 7, maybe grouped by pillars, but how do you organize such process when you sell so many different products?
Good question. So these 7 products exist across 6 websites. So 6 Webflow instances, 6 websites, 6 funnels, at least 6 funnels. We have other websites, by the way, as well, that funnel into these websites. So there's quite a big funnel logic. But there are companies that I know, also other companies in different parts of the world, where they have literally what's called a holding group, and under that holding group would have many brands, and these brands keep referring traffic to each other. It's a super, super advanced and clever strategy where website 1 sends traffic to website 2, etc. Because why pay Google again for the same users, etc.? Why don't you build out a logic where you sort of circulate that user across your ecosystem of sites, products, etc., right? So we know we're going to be a very big business. So may as well you drive the user onto a particular site. So naturally, some of these products are like, super simple. Hey, go and set up your infrastructure, right? Very, pain is very clear. I need to set up infrastructure, I need to set up fast, I need to set up cheap. You land on this website, you look at it, and let's say, for example, you don't need you decide, okay, it's not for me. And that's it, you would leave. Typical behavior is you bounce, right? But what we're trying to do is actually like at least, so what we're trying to do is when the user enters our website, we're trying to do at least 3 things, I would say. 3 things. 1 is we want them to progress through a typical funnel. They can either sign up or book a demo. For us, this is like a mainstream funnel. Option 2 is they can call us on the website live or chat to us. It's like a kind of speak to a human like right now. Is a different funnel because that's where sales gets involved. And guess what? We do over 200 calls per month we get on inbound across 6 sites. We get a lot of calls. and it just goes into Slack, and you literally pick up the phone. It's like, hello, how can I help you? That's literally what it is. Works like
Is
magically.
i- is
And
it the
then,
tool? Is it face to face?
yeah, face to face. Yeah.
Because you were referred to this podcast by Nick Tomich, the previous guest,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I'm guessing that's his tool because it is the way he has this
Yes. So
way
the
to
Nick
be.
has a fantastic tool for both on the website experience and also in-app experience, meaning
Mm,
within the software itself, you can also call humans.
mm,
So Nick software is really fantastic on that front. And then the third option, which is the
mm,
compound kind of website, is the user may go from website 1 to website 2 to explore either a similar product, even a competing product, so not an infrastructure product, or a totally different product for a different pay. So from, let's say, from the infrastructure product, you transition to the data product as an example, right? So that means the attribution on the data website comes from
mm,
the infrastructure product. And guess what? In my analytics, the user will say, let's say on the data product, they entered the website from the infrastructure product. It's literally what it says. Referral traffic, or so when I say it's literally what it says, what I mean by that is it's not actually always the Google Analytics data or something like that. We highly advise to track proper attribution where you're asking on a sign up form, where do you hear about us? And it's an open field. It's a gold mine. It's really a gold mine of information. How people find about you, hear about you, etc. Because imagine we're doing this podcast and somebody listens in and somebody will go to the product and check it out. And if we're gonna have the drop down fields, let's say in the drop down fields, it's just gonna say podcast
mm.
as an example.
Yeah, it's
Which
nice to have
podcast you have
open-ended.
no clue.
Which
No
one?
clue. And the other problem with the drop down, for example, fields is that the people just want to sign up, so they'll pick the
Mm,
first one. So imagine if podcast will be the first thing in the drop down, then people will just start clicking podcast, 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 so they can progress through. And then you're gonna start investing a lot of money into podcasts because your data says from a drop, because you use a drop down mechanism, that is coming from podcasts. So that's why open fields are important, because open fields can give you juicy data, but people can also type in random stuff in there as well. But you can eliminate the random stuff and just focus on the stuff where it's very clear where they're coming from, and you will see some magical things, really magical things in that open field.
mm,
If you struggle as a human to process that data, because you say, "Oh, Frank, like we have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leads per week," for example, and my head of growth, he complains that he needs to transform that data set to. And I was like, dude, why don't you use LLMs, to transform? Like whenever there's a problem, think that there's an AI agent, there's an LLM, there's NA10,
yeah.
to automate stuff. Yeah, I hear a lot of human complaints these days. Now I'm always like, did you use an AI agent maybe to solve this? And people are not still in the mindset, to solve the problems with the AI agent, but a lot of things can be solved. Anyway, so like super advice to do the attribution, like, that particular way. And then so that's why it's super powerful
Mm.
to have these multiple sites. You need to
But
you need to keep the user in your environment of your product or websites. So apart from having the strategy of many websites, we, for each of the websites, its own funnel, its own marketing strategy, etc. And even, for example, for 1 out of 6 websites, we do large scale programmatic SEO. We launch millions and millions of pages, for example, from a programmatic standpoint. And then that super fat top of the funnel could be, for example, transition to other products. So yeah, you definitely build very sophisticated funnels per product. So maybe the easiest way to think about it is each of the products is like running a startup in a startup. And you know that this startup has to make money, but this startup could make money for the other startup as well, right? But the primary goal is that this startup has to make money. Because if this startup doesn't make money, we have a problem. And then the secondary goal that this startup should make money for this other startup. And then it rolls up into the macro kind of company, right? That's the kind of the thought process. So this
I,
also explains, if you have a very sort of thought out sort of a funnel strategy or thought out product strategy, is the reason why you are profitable instead of burning cash like most companies are. We were profitable since day zero because the strategy was solid since day zero. There's a compound effect. There's a user enters this point and then goes to that point, transitions to that point, and
mm.
ultimately ends up. Yeah, so this is just to give you kind of thought process on why I highly recommend not just to sell one thing always, but what is the second thing? Always ask yourself back in your mind, I'm selling him this thing. What's the second next best thing I could sell to the same user and to the same buyer? What else would they buy from me, right? So
I'm gonna dive more into the ICP part, but thanks for the overview. And just to give our listeners feel, I think you should check out the website of salesforge.ai, everyone who's listening, because you can see all the architecture in all the products. You can still access all different websites from the menu directly. But to give you just an overview of how big of a machine it is, I just found out that there's like 20 free tools just to create part of your outbound process, and just to, as a lead gen thing, it's a huge machine. I see that. That's I
It's
can't guess
huge.
how big your funnel is when you have so many. Like, I've checked out articles for one website. That's quite impressive, and I'm really curious to dive more into the data. I wish I had access to your dashboard, honestly, but but that's like
It's a
that's a
big
huge,
dashboard.
it's a
Many
huge
dashboards.
machine. Like, it's a huge. I can just get it. Just anyone who's listening, just check it out, just out of curiosity, if you're enjoying all of the thought process on funnels. And really interesting one. And I think I want to dive more into two things. The first is the branding aspect,
Hmm.
because we both agree that to scale, you have to have stuff that compounds over time.
Yep.
And when you split with resources, in terms of product wise, engineering,
Hmm.
and brand wise,
Hmm.
you don't build enough of a positioning as fast as you could, because you have different products to build and to advocate
Hmm.
for. Just like now you are doing a podcast, but in the
Yep.
end, people will remember probably the main product, which is Salesforge.
Yep.
So it's really, isn't it cannibalism between your products in terms of branding?
That's a good question. The way I always, from a branding standpoint, I always refer to one and only company from a product, from a branding kind of standpoint, and that's Apple. If you think about what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to advertise Apple, not iPhone. You know what I mean?
That Apple started with iPhone. I mean, not the
I
iPhone,
know
but
it started,
it
but
started from the products, and that the success of one product that allowed them to scale to the next one.
yeah, but from the kind of, I think, branding standpoint, the asset that I'm promoting is the Apple, and Apple is not the product. I'm promoting essentially what typically I would say the forge, and the forge has many forges, right? So, and it's kind of similar to me, like with Apple as well. So when Tim Cook or anybody else, when we talk about Apple, we talk about Apple. We don't talk about iPhone on the Mac, right? So that's for me exactly the same thing. You talk about Frank, you think about the forge, and the forge has many forges, and the forges are for different pain points. Same as Apple and iPhone is for this pain point, and Mac is for that. But they're all part of the stack. They're all part of the ecosystem. Just like Apple has Apple ID, we have Forge ID as well to log into different softwares with the same ID. And so it's a very, very similar, I would say, brand play, and how we position, how we go to market. I think we are even spicing some things up. So, for example, naturally, this software is, so this is a sales technology software, and it has been built essentially by former VP sales. So there's a high core. There's also the story of the brand of like some guy, has been in sales for a long time, was managing a large sales team, got frustrated by a particular pain, which was having too much headcount, and then has built a software that allows you to reduce headcount. Like, there's a very, good, clear kind of story that you can outline to the audience out there. But yeah, you have to start with the initial product. So just like Apple had an initial product, we also have an initial product. That's Salesforce, and then it always has to be the flagship product, I would say. What is the core centerpiece? Because we were always back of our mind, back even in the days before even shipping code and everything, we knew it's going to be a big piece of thing. We knew it's going to be, a lot of technology. But what is the first one that we started? It's very important that you start with the core flagship product, I would say, not the adjacent products. Is my take, because it becomes very tricky then. If you start with the wrong product, essentially, starting with the right product is important, essentially. But not gonna go dabble into that. So it had to be Salesforge, and then we named the company as Salesforge. But now there's even a thought process. We have to rename the company to Forge, really, because it is Forge, and people typically refer as the Forge. There were also times where other products were making more money than Salesforge, so people were calling us as the CEO of not Salesforge, but let's say Mailforge or other products. But I'm that. See, but yes, there's that confusion, like what you're referring to. Maybe confusion, or people referring that they think that I actually run a totally different company or whatever. They associate me with the other Forge, but that's not even the core Forge. And that's because some products would take off maybe more, or they would be amplified more, or they would be spoken in dark social, meaning WhatsApp groups and Slack communities more, the other products rather than the core product. So it is tricky. And I think whenever I meet, depending on who I meet and who I talk to, I talk about different products. But the value, like, I kind of try and dumb it down, maybe simpler. Whenever I talk to a user, I don't like pitch products. I just ask, what's your problem? What would you like to chat about? And they will tell me, Frank, I have a data problem. So then then I go and talk to them about my data product when they tell me they have a data problem. If somebody's going to come up to me and say, Frank, I have an email deliverability problem, then I talk about my email
Mm.
deliverability product. So I think you become, when you have multiple products, you become more of a consultant, and ultimately the customer just has a problem and they need to be solved. And yes, there's multiple forges, and yes, you can kind of get confused also from a branding standpoint, which product does what. And that's a disadvantage of this approach. The disadvantage of building a modular stack with multiple websites, multiple brands, is that you can get, yes, confused a bit. There's a little learning curve for understanding what everybody does. But actually, once you get into this, you really value this. And so we got a lot of feedback on that front. But the upside is that, hey, if you really enjoy my data product, and there's a few reasons why, for example, our data product is like crushing in the market. So we, for example, offer the cheapest mobile numbers in the market at 8 cents. There's no provider that can sell you mobile numbers at 8 cents, or you can extract competitive followers, right? So, and some people just need this data product. They don't need the rest of the stuff. So imagine you go to other competitive softwares, and there's a lot of stuff in there. It's like Salesforce, a lot of softwares, so much stuff in there. But you really need just this little part in that software, right? This module. That's what you value a lot.
Mm.
So we have a competitor. I'm not going to name them, but we have a competitor, and this competitor does everything in the software, everything. But the main value of the competitor is their data, nothing else. Nothing else, just the data. So if the data is the only valuable thing from that competitor, that's how I think about why wouldn't be decoupled from the software and would be like in a different environment,
Mm.
like standalone, right? So, and because
So,
if you then decouple it and put it into separate websites, my thought process is as follows: is that you can increase monetization actually if you focus into a separate app and have a better experience, more simplified experience, just on the data side of the business, streamlined UX, better UX, better monetization, API for this product. Essentially it's fully optimized around the data side of the business. And that's how you drive maximum monetization for this capability rather than having that built in. So this is my sort of, thought
okay.
process, how I think about it. And to validate this, today we power over 20 other companies, including competitors, with our forges. These competitors or these tech companies would have never bought our product if it would be all in one. But because it's decoupled, they do buy. And guess what? These tech companies, these other companies that have a high usage levels, just take the API of this one of the 6 forges, and just plug it into their software. And that's totally fine. And this is an example of increasing monetization levels of a single product. And because they just need this module. And a lot of companies need a module of what you do and just to plug it into their ecosystem. So we're like Switzerland in that case. Just take whatever you need from me and just go and use it. Plug it into your, workflow environment, software, embed, whatever you want to do. Like, we don't really mind, and use it. And this is, for me, increasing monetization of a particular, feature of or product, whatever suite, or within the whole ecosystem. So that's the advantage. So yeah.
So if I summarize, for the branding part, you are trying now to maybe more centralize on the Forge,
Yeah.
but until now you still focused on Salesforge because it was the
Yes.
main one, but you adapted your pitch depending on who you're talking to. And
Yes.
the way you see having this modular approach with different products is a way for you to not sell at loss, but to kind of be able to independently handle the profitability of each product, and to not only sells better because it match better the desire, the need, the concrete need of your ICP, but also to then focus on usage rather than expansion and a different, like the use. I think
So
it
it's a
works.
land and
We
franchise
didn't mention
module.
it. We didn't mention, but I think it's important to mention to
Mm-hmm.
the listeners that your pricing is usage based.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
that's how it's working for you, because because you match better the need of your clients, your customers. Not only it's not a loss for you, because in the end you're usage based. So even if they only use one part of the product, because you charge per usage or per outcome, it's a way for you to be profitable without. Whereas if other companies were doing this, they would be losing maybe money on this because they would charge overall and not just depending on the usage or maybe on the seats.
Yeah, exactly. It's usage based, and I believe that seat based pricing is dying because you need fewer humans to do jobs today. So there's a thing called jobs to be done in product
Mm.
term. So jobs to be done, you need fewer humans to do jobs. So if that's the case, why do you charge per seat? Because your revenue will contract. So the assumption is that the that agents or software will do more work, or is doing already more work than, versus a human. So humans start doing less work in a particular job workflow, whatever
Mm.
workflow, and the software or agents do more work. So if that's the case, that means that software usage goes up. So you should charge for usage. And so we don't do outcome-based pricing. Some companies start
Okay.
doing that, like Intercom, etc. The only reason why you should do outcome-based pricing is when it's very predictable, meaning you can get predictably to these outcomes. That means there's a high degree, there's high probability that these outcomes do happen. And then, yes, you have essentially, you can put your machine learning sort of hat on. Is
Mm.
like, yeah, I predict a lot of them will happen. So we can charge for outcomes. Totally fine.
Mm.
But if outcomes are very unpredictable or very hard to achieve, etc.,
Like it is in sales. Mm.
yeah, like in sales, for example. Yeah, exactly. Because one thing, so we could charge for outcomes. So only if you book a meeting, I'll charge you. In theory, like I personally don't care. But every customer is different. Every customer has different product market fit level. Some have no product market fit. And why should, so like, if you don't have product market fit and you don't have what's also called product channel fit, why should I risk on you? You know
Usage
what
is
I
a
mean?
way for you to de-risk it and also to match what they actually need. If they don't just need a few usage, it works. And for you, it's the best way for you to price it.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of what other things people just never think about. They totally ignore their website. I've seen a lot of ugly websites by founders. If you want to see a good
I
website, go
have
to my
to.
website. Right? Like as an example, right? And
Yeah.
then there's a bunch of ugly ones. And a lot of founders are not self-aware that their website is very ugly. I just saw another ugly website yesterday, literally, with another US customer, actually. And even US people, US folks don't also understand how good websites have to look like and why they need to convert and why good websites build credibility, right? So there's other assets of the business that need to look credible. You need to look credible on LinkedIn. How does your LinkedIn profile even look like? How are you on social? Are you a somebody? There are a lot of reasons why people buy our stuff and they buy so aggressively because of my LinkedIn. You can go and have a look at my LinkedIn. It will give you an idea why people would buy my stuff. Well, you can see my history. The guy, he was always in sales. Now he's building a sales product. He's been managing teams. It gives you some sort of confidence, It gives the sense that this is an authority. They probably know what they're doing. The other way to look at it is like customers don't just rent software. They just don't like necessarily always just look at software. They look at what's the team. They're not just renting the software, they're renting the team behind the software. So what's the team? What's Frank's team? So when I hire as well, I'm trying to think who's going to be representing me or my company, etc. And that's Frank's team. And people want to, in a lot of cases, imagine we compete against other competitors and we have the same product. Sometimes some people will say,
Mm.
Frank, you have exactly the same product. I say, okay, but I like your team better because I have more faith that your product has been designed correctly or whatever, whatever that is. But it's the human factors, which is why people buy from people,
The power of
right?
personal branding.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why branding matters. That's why who you hire in your team matters. The how fast the chat support is. All these components that people just barely ever think about. So that is like super important. Like, so I'm a big believer. You don't just rent the software, you rent the team behind the software. So I that's how I buy stuff as well. And I believe a lot of other people buy the software in a very similar fashion. Not everybody, but
Mhm.
if I'm able to have this layer of you buying my stuff because of my team, and it's a strong layer, the conversions go up, everything goes up, and things just are
Mm.
better overall. But people don't invest in that side. They just think they just need to build the software and everything will happen. That's not how it works. So yeah.
Indeed, I'm a marketer, so I'm a fervent believer of the same thing. I can't disagree with you on this. And I've seen so many ugly websites, man, especially in the tech space where people think their website is pretty because it's new and modern, but it's still, but yeah, you know
Yeah,
this
there's
part.
there's a saying in the space, inbound led sort of outbound, whatever. There's a
Mm.
saying essentially because I connect to a lot of ICPs and I connect to them every week. I compound my
Mm.
ICPs in my network on LinkedIn, which is
Mm.
why I have so many followers, right? And then I do a lot of creative stunts, even being in a bathtub. Like there's a Margaret Robbie essentially scene where I'm also in a bathtub talking about stuff. You can go in my feature section, you can have a look at it. And you do a lot of creative marketing, a lot of pattern interrupt kind of stuff
Mm.
to have a sort of strong brand recall. So when my sales rep or my AI agent will reach out to you, you're more likely to respond back to me because wow, it's some guy from the Forge, and you want to respond back because you remember Frank from the Forge doing
Mm.
some crazy stuff on LinkedIn feed. So this is why spicing things up on LinkedIn, meaning edutainment, is mandatory. So you don't just educate your audience in different places, but you need to learn how to entertain people. People want to be entertained on LinkedIn. They love drama. They love funny stuff. But if you do some funny stuff with some drama, how do you educate them within that content? How do you make content enjoyable to consume, essentially, right? Like they get educated and then they want to buy your stuff, right? Like that's the magic of marketing and sales and doing that really well. So you can see that, in the featured assets, how we do that. And I highly recommend that you think outside the box, because the thing is that LinkedIn feed, or generally any feed, Facebook feed, is on average just boring. And it
Indeed.
feels boring and it feels like whatever. How do you spice things up? Think to yourself, is this what I call a pat interrupt? Just show it to your wife. And if she doesn't say, wow, oh my God, if she doesn't say that, don't launch it. It has to be, oh my God, oh wow. Like that's the reaction that you're looking for. It's a showstopper. It's a feed stopper. You stop, you're like, oh my God. And I can tell you the amount of good stuff that came out of it, even though we have to prepare for it. We spent hours and days to prepare the content and everything to build that brand and be a showstopper. You have a strong brand recall. I'm gonna give you the best brand recall probably of this year. It was on April Fool's. On April Fool's, I told everybody on LinkedIn that I got fired by the board because I was cooking the books. It went viral. So viral that I got like over 500 messages from everybody, including our own investors, that we didn't tell them that we're going to play this. We decided the night before that
That's
I will be
wild.
fired tomorrow. I did everything to make it super believable. I even got deleted from Slack to make it believable. So the night before, I just said, guys, to the co-founder, just delete me tomorrow and just tell everybody in Slack that something happened last night. We spoke to the board and they fired me because I was cooking the books, etc. And the reason why this was also so believable is because I was always saying how fast we grow, etc. And then bam, at some point I'm saying that I was cooking the books. The thing is that in that particular time frame, there's other companies where CEOs got fired and other people were sort of cooking the books. So it also kind of made it believable that, Frank's cooking the books, and it just went viral, went into WhatsApp communities and dark socials, etc. So how do you go viral? Like try to go viral once a month. So it's not something you do daily or weekly, but if you can go viral once a month, what would you do? And we have to spend days, hours, weeks sometimes, to actually launch. We're launching actually, by the way, something today as well to go viral. So straight after the podcast, by the way.
I'm gonna check it out. And so I can see your ambition behind comparing to Apple, aiming for big, and even if you're in your marketing, so that's good. And Frank, I'm gonna follow you. I think it's really interesting how you build this Forge. I can't wait to see more product from the Forge and how the Forge will grow big. So I think you have both nights to go, but I think that was a great conversation. I'm excited to see how it goes. I think it's a kind of a novel and a new way of seeing the SaaS based on everything I've seen in terms of
Mhm.
mono products, mono companies with one bet all in, and you find a way to leverage this huge funnel. And that was really interesting for me to dive more into this. So thanks, Frank, for sharing. If everyone was listening, remember to subscribe to this podcast, but also to check out Frank in a bathtub if you go on his LinkedIn. And go check out his website as well so you can see how it goes in terms of funnel. Thanks for watching, and Frank, I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thanks so much.